I'm 0 for 2 finishing through hikes. I completed 720 miles out of 800 on the Arizona Trail last year and 175 out of 220 miles on the Washita Trail earlier this year. Both trails were amazing experiences that proved to be big challenges in their own ways, but part of me was frustrated that I couldn't finish either. The Long Trail in Vermont would be my next through hiking undertaking. The LT made perfect sense to me as I'd be in that region of the country anyway. My cousin was getting married on June 28th, so I had 24 days to hike 273 miles from the Massachusetts-Vermont border all the way to Canada. I spent a couple days at my parents' place in Virginia outfitting, packing, unpacking, and repacking for the trek before I drove up to North Adams, Massachusetts near the southern terminus. It was a hot first day in the mid-80s in North Adams. There are about 4 miles of approach trail to get to the true Vermont border where the Long Trail officially begins. I met a couple brothers in the parking lot starting off on their respective journeys, one on the LT and one finishing up on the Appalachian Trail. The Long Trail follows the AT for about 100 miles before the AT splits off northeast to New Hampshire and Maine, while the LT heads due north to Canada. Workers started building the Long Trail in 1910, and the AT was actually inspired by the Long Trail. I personally couldn't be more excited to get back on the trail. I had just guided a couple week-long backpacking trips around Pisgah National Forest and Shenandoah National Park, and I was yearning for a solo trip. This trip would feel different as I had a set date to end by. I wasn't exactly sure or ready for what I was about to encounter out on the Long Trail. It's technically the end of mud season up in the Green Mountains, but several more challenges would present themselves along the way. It took a couple hours till mid-morning to make it the 4 miles to the border. It definitely was starting to be real. At the time, I didn't even realize that the Green Mountains comes from the name of the actual state, Vermont. Vermont comes from the French term Vermont, which means green mountain. Much of the trail was a thick mix of softwood and hardwood forest, including lots of pine, balsam fir, spruce, beech, maple, and birch trees. It seemed like a thick, healthy forest, and it was always a pleasant surprise to find a break in the foliage for a nice view. I took lunch at the side of a forest road. It was perfect timing for a break from some of the bugs in the thick forest. I caught the first pretty sweet view at some power lines. My next goal would be to make it to Seth Warner's shelter for an afternoon break. The shelters turned out to be a game changer, similar to when I was out on the Washita Trail. A reprieve from the bugs and the sun, and amenities like bear boxes, privies, tent pads, and places to hang wet gear would come in clutch. I was impressed by some of the fine beaver architecture of the Green Mountains. Huge signs of beavers from large dams, beaver ponds, and chewed up trees would be everywhere. I hiked 13.7 miles that day and camped near a stream just south of Congdon Shelter. 3,500 feet of elevation gain on the first day was not very easy. It's always such a great feeling getting into camp for the night, and I unpacked and set up at what was a great spot. I can't really quite get my water filter to work well. This took like half an hour to fill 1.5 liters, so I don't know if it's broken or clogged or just overused, but it's really not flowing. And I have a new system and I haven't really gotten it to work yet, so I don't know where the problem is, but might have to get a new filter or new system at the first stop. We'll see. It's not looking the best. It was a solid first day though. Hiked like 14 miles today. It was a good first day. I'm happy to be back on trail already. And it is a little bit buggy, but it's not too bad at all. Well, looks like it's not filtering water. All in all, it was a successful first day out there. At this moment, part of me was still nervous I wouldn't be able to finish the entire trail, but I knew I would enjoy the 3 weeks out in the wilderness no matter what. Morning came pretty quick on day 2. I was trying out a new breakfast out in the backcountry, powdered milk and granola. It was pretty good and a step up from my normal Pop-Tart and or honey bun. I enjoyed sleeping and waking up to the sound of flowing water from Stamford Stream. Seemed like it would be a bug net type of day from early in the morning before I gained some elevation climbing Stratton Mountain. Turned out to be a lovely, calm, overcast morning. Congdon Shelter was a pretty cool area to hike around and a good warm-up for the rest of the day. I was trying to get in the groove of my routine while getting as many miles in as I could early. I ran into a southbound AT hiker who was asking where the next shelter was. It seemed like we were both just trying to keep it moving in opposite directions and away from the mosquitoes. There was just a bear. I didn't pull out the phone in time to get any video of it, but I haven't seen a bear in a while. But yeah, then he just scurried off. He was pretty scared, so. I've heard there's plenty of bear activity in this area, especially around Congdon Shelter, which is like 1.5 miles back. Harmon Hill was a great morning snack spot before a couple miles to the Route 9 intersection. A friendly sign reminder that Canada was still 259 miles away. Seeing the bear really lifted my spirits and got my adrenaline going for a bit. It's always so cool to have animal sightings like that. I walked by and admired Split Rock before taking a break at Melville Shelter. The smell of Fraser fir was strong that morning, and would be a cool feature I enjoyed about these mountainsides. This ecosystem was unlike any other I'd seen in my thru hikes. The Green Mountains are part of the Appalachian chain and were formed over 400 million years ago. At that time, Vermont and New Hampshire were separated by an ocean. Tectonic plate shifts closed this ocean, pushed the two landmasses together, and formed the Grand Green Mountain Ridge. These mountains are made up of folded and faulted sedimentary rock, metamorphosed volcanic rock, and ocean crust. I'm like less than a quarter mile from this next shelter. It's like 6:40 right now. It's nice that I have a lot of daylight, but this last mile and a half or so, I've really just been trudging up the hill and one foot in front of the other. It's been tough. Glad it's not too hot out at all. Feels nice, honestly, the cloud cover and the mist and just the small amount of rain throughout the day. It's cooled me off. Last little push to the shelter. It really felt like I was stair-stepping up all afternoon. A light drizzle almost all day rarely was able to break through the tree canopy and was not a problem at all. I tried filtering water again, and it took a good 30 minutes, just another waste of time. I made it to Goddard Shelter around 7:30 that evening. A man hiking the AT at the shelter said I brought the storm with me. I hiked around 14.7 miles that day and over 4,000 feet of elevation gain. It was an awesome day, and I had noted that some of the lakes and marshes were reminding me of Canada and Alaska.
I decided to do my shakedown hike on the Appalachian Trail. So when I left, I didn't know whether I was going to go 50, 150, or the whole thing. But turns out I hiked the whole thing on my.
That morning, I had a cool conversation with the dude that was asleep at the shelter when I showed up the night before. His wife had recently passed, and he said he just got bored of being alone, so he started walking the AT.
Caught behind Venetian blinds, try to reach for the city lights. This ain't where I belong. Hey, look at me, man, what I've become. I've been running east, looking for a sunset, digging deep.
The morning of day 3 was full of creatures. Mosquitoes and black flies were out pretty strong, especially in the lower valleys. There were tons of these cool orange salamanders every few hundred feet on the trail that I would learn to be eastern newts. I saw a black snake with yellow stripes and accidentally scared a turkey and her dozen chicks that ran in all different directions. I felt bad for interrupting and causing such a commotion. Alright, made it to Kelly Stand Road. Apparently there is a trail angel who picks people up here, but I didn't get in contact with them beforehand, and I don't have service, so gotta just keep pushing to the next road intersection for Manchester and I'll get there, if not tomorrow, then early the next morning, so I'm not too pressed about it. These little ducklings. Oh, it's a turkey.
It's time for me to go, burn all bridges, all I know. I got lost along the way, fell between the foam, pulling stitches.
I'm in a little bit of a predicament here. I've been looking for water the last 2 or 3 miles, and I'm really trying to not have to scoop anything out of like a beaver pond or anything like that. Because I don't even think I'm filtering water using my filter. I think it's just shot. I'm trying to find things that are like mini waterfalls. So it's just like pouring straight into the bottle. It's difficult. And right now I've hiked, 13 or 14 miles. And it's like 5:30 and I hear thunder in the distance. And I have like 1,000 to 1,500 foot climb up here to the top of this little mountain, and there's a fire lookout and there's a spring there. So it's like, okay, do I just scoop water out of this? Do I hike 1.5 miles up and get caught in a storm but have guaranteed water, and it's late and I'm tired and I'm feeling the pre-storm winds too, so I think I'm just gonna try and get water here and set up camp quick and go from there, because there's a really nice campsite like 1/10 of a mile that way, so try and get some water. I still had only met one person on the trail so far that was also through hiking the Long Trail, and was hoping to meet some more soon. I was elated with my decision to not start the climb up Stratton Mountain that evening. I made dinner and passed out pretty early to rain falling on the tent. I was excited to hike into Manchester Center the next day for a town day and the first resupply of the trip. Man, I sure made the right decision because the weather turned quick. It just got so dark. Some big gusts of wind and I hear some raindrops. So I need to cook and just relax for the night because I'm happy with my decision. I just hope that the water is all right and my stomach can handle it. I woke up around 6:45 a.m. on day 4. It usually takes about an hour from the time I wake up to the time I start hiking. I like to take my time to pack up, use the restroom, have breakfast, filter water, and maybe do a couple stretches before heading out in the morning. I was planning to climb Stratton Mountain that day, the first real test on the Long Trail going north. I finished the climb up Stratton in the fog, where I took a break and ate a second breakfast. I met a group of AT hikers at the top of the mountain. They'd just got into contact with a friend who checked into the ER after being bitten by multiple ticks and was getting sick and developing a bad reaction. It's some pretty sad news for them to hear for someone they've been hiking 1,600 plus miles with. Well, from what I see, this is supposed to be the best view on the trail up to this point. It was really cool to see the clouds whip by from the top of the fire tower. I filled up water from a spring near the top of Stratton, which I assumed to be perfectly fine to drink from without filtering. From here is pretty much all downhill for 10 miles until Route 11. I passed by Stratton Pond and several mountain streams on the other side of Stratton. Parts of the trail were really getting muddy, but a lot of the times the trail had plenty of rocks, logs, and 2x4s to walk on to stay dry. It's definitely thanks to the Green Mountain Club and the many volunteers who work to maintain the Long Trail. That's gotta be a bear track, right? Alright, I made my decision. It's like 3:30 and I'm deciding to take the spur trail and hike into Manchester Center. Maybe I'll be able to hitch in, maybe I'll get picked up by someone, we'll see. If not, I think it's just another 1.5 mile road walk into town, so shouldn't be too bad. But the outdoor store closes at 6, so I'm hoping I can just make it to there, grocery store after that, maybe get a bite to eat somewhere, and then get a ride back to the trailhead. And if all that happens today, I will be thrilled. If not, I don't know what I'll do, so let's make it happen. I walked by Prospect Rock with a great view of the Valley of Manchester. There I met a couple nice couples who were asking me questions about the trail, and they were super kind to offer a ride into town. I was pumped to finally make it into Manchester. Right away I went to Gear House Outdoor Store for a new Sawyer Squeeze water filter. I took and left a few things at their hiker box as well. I resupplied at Price Chopper and loaded up on food. Finally, I got a yummy burrito from the Avocado Pit and hung out at the town park. So I went to get a burrito in town in Manchester, hung out there for a while, and then I decided to head out of town. It's like a 4 or 5 mile walk back to the trailhead. And I didn't even get, I don't know, a third of a mile down the road. I was basically still in Main Street. This dude drives by me, he puts his brake lights on, then he keeps going. I'm like, Was he debating on giving me a ride? He recognized me as a hiker for sure. I should have had my thumb stuck out, but he circles around and asks if he can take me back to the trailhead. I'm like, dude, you're the man. So, super nice people in Vermont. I got rides into and out of town without even having to like ask or use my thumb. So, can't ask for much more than that. I'm getting lucky. I should have hiked the extra couple miles to Bromley Shelter. Instead, I woke up at 5 a.m. to the rain and had to hike while it was pouring rain that morning. My tent was soaked and shoes covered in slugs. I arrived to Bromley Shelter and planned to take an extended break to dry some things and wait out the storm. I continued the hike up Bromley and was pleasantly surprised to find out it's a ski resort. I think this is a ski slope. This might be part of a ski mountain. Bromley Mountain, maybe? I continued on north along the Bromley Ridge over Stiles Peak and Peru Peak. Even though there weren't many amazing 360-degree views, I was enjoying walking the ominous wilderness among the clouds. Really cool moss lined the trail on both sides. Plenty of animal activity and moose poop galore. The strong smell of balsam fir keeping me going. For these reasons and many more, the Peru Peak Wilderness would be my favorite section of the Long Trail. I met a mom and a daughter at Peru Peak Shelter. They forgot their sporks on an overnight trip, so I gave them the trail names Mango and Cheese, as they had to eat their mac and cheese with mango strips. Peru Peak Wilderness is one of 8 wilderness areas in the Green Mountain National Forest in Vermont. This wilderness was created in '84 by the Vermont Wilderness Act, and its 7,800 acres are managed by the U.S. Forest Service. Interestingly enough, there are at least 70 unique natural communities within the Green Mountain National Forest, including wetlands, evergreen stands, alpine meadows, rocky outcrops, and cliffs. Moose, beaver, coyote, white-tailed deer, black bear, and wild turkey are all known to inhabit the wilderness. What a view. One of the only full clear views without any fog or anything. This is Baker Peak and I just need a little break. This trail is just like vertical for like a quarter mile. Just up this rock slab, and it's all tilted rock too, so not exactly easy to walk on. The Big Branch River Wilderness was stunning. If there is one place I definitely want to come back to on the Long Trail for a day hike or overnight trip, it would definitely be along Big Branch. I would absolutely love to hang out all day, set up camp, cook a good meal, and soak in one of the many swimming holes along Big Branch. That afternoon, I walked by some remains of the Aldrichville Mill Village. It was an 1890s village, but today only a few substantial stone walls, several ground depressions, half-buried bricks, scattered metal machinery parts, clusters of historic artifacts, and an unnaturally young vegetated landscape remain as surface evidence. The historic road, once a main thoroughfare connecting South and East Wallingford, now the common path of the Long Trail and Appalachian Trails, seems a ghostly footpath. Temporary settlement of Audrickville was simulated by the desirable virgin forest, comprised mostly of spruce, yellow birch, and hemlock. Years of intensive logging and clear cutting to feed the hungry mill wrought great changes in the ecosystem. That evening, I walked by a cool rock garden of man-made cairns, passed by the same group of AT hikers from the day before, and walked a quarter-mile off-trail to set up camp by Greenwall Shelter. I was thoroughly enjoying the Green Mountain wilderness and was mentally preparing for the Killington Mountain, first 4,000-foot elevation mountain on the trail, and the start of the difficult northern mountains. I woke up to rain around 5 in the morning, and it took another hour and a half to get out of my tent. The past couple mornings there have been a bunch of slugs on my tent and my socks and shoes inside the vestibule of my tent. I crossed Bully Brook and Route 140 and caught an awesome view from the dome ledge. I was now beginning the Killington section of the Long Trail. Mount Killington is a big ski resort and the first mountain above 4,000 feet in elevation along the trail. The Killington section was actually pretty fun. It was a nice lead-up trail from the bottom of the mountain, and only the last half mile up was pretty steep and made things interesting. I even enjoyed a few switchbacks, which seemed to be pretty rare out here in Vermont. Unfortunately, when I made it to the top, it was still overcast out and we were up in the clouds at the peak, which seemed to be the trend. This section was very rocky, and with a lot of cloudy skies and rain the past few days, it made for a dangerous area. I took a couple nasty falls on the rocks, usually trusting moss to provide some traction, which it didn't. I had no time to catch myself either fall, but luckily I fell backwards onto my pack. I was just happy not to break myself or my bear can. There even was a sign a few hundred feet later that warned about a ranger getting injured recently as well. I was running low on food and decided to walk into Rutland for the night and do a full resupply. Picked up some fries for a food truck to eat along my 7-mile road walk. I made it into Rutland and right away went to the post office to ship home my big camera and tripod. It was too much weight and I wasn't using it enough for it to make sense keeping. It was a big lift off of my shoulders in many ways. I resupplied next door at Walmart and made it to the Yellow Deli Hiker Hostel where I showered, did laundry, relaxed, and got a pizza from Hop and Moose Brew Co. next door. I set an early alarm and caught a 7:15 a.m. bus ride from Rutland back to the inn at Long Trail, next to the trailhead. It was about a mile past here until the main junction, where the LT and the AT split off. Alright, so I just passed the 100-mile mark, and this is where the LT splits from the AT. So the AT goes a little bit more northeast towards New Hampshire, the White Mountains, and eventually Maine and Mount Katahdin. And the Long Trail continues more directly north this way. So Bye-bye to all the AT hikers that I have come across, and hope they enjoy the White Mountains. Nikita. I met another northbound thru hiker at Tucker Johnson Shelter named Rick with his awesome dog Nikita. Nikita was easily keeping up and full of energy. The first day on trail after the split from the AT, the Long Trail was noticeably less maintained, more narrow, had more blowdowns, and also had a plethora of spiders making their webs right across the trail. In the mornings, I seemed to be breaking every web, and at times I was just walking while holding my trekking pole vertically in front of my face. I figured I'd just do a quick little update. I'm at the David Logan shelter. I've hiked about 13 miles since the highway intersection this morning from being in Rutland, Vermont. I'm feeling pretty good. I feel like a lot of things that were going wrong in the first couple days, I'm kind of fixing. I got a new water filter. My blisters aren't doing bad at all. I'm definitely not running out of food. I got plenty of snacks, so I feel like a lot of the things that I was kind of frustrated about aren't as bad, and the bugs really haven't been that bad at all, knock on wood. I think I'm gonna push on a little bit today, do a few more miles. There's a really cool shelter built last year, like 5 miles ahead, and it's like 4:30. I don't know if I want to hike that far, but I'll at least do like 2.5 or so, we'll see. What are these things? They're like mini Christmas trees. I've never seen these before. It seemed like I was now shelter hopping, taking breaks at each one. I hung out at Ralston Rest Shelter a while and had lunch at a pond lookout. Filtered more water and chilled at David Logan Shelter. Finally hiked a bit more up to Bloodroot Gap and camped at the junction of a few snowmobile trails. It was a 17-mile day approaching 40,000 steps. I set up camp and made dinner. The bugs were so bad I took my dinner to the tent to eat before cleaning up, which would turn out to be a big mistake. Woke up early and went through my normal packing routine. It was a lovely morning with a bit of dew on my tent. The sun was penetrating through the mist in the air, creating cool looking sun rays. I got lucky having a privy right near me at the top of that ridge too. I decided to wait a couple miles until Sunrise Shelter to have my Pop-Tart breakfast. Check out this awesome shelter. This is what I missed out on last night. Camping before it, about 2 miles. Definitely wouldn't have been empty. There had been people here. It was probably a good decision to just camp where I camped, but there's even windows. Check this out. There's 4 big windows. Probably one of the newer ones. I just backtracked half mile. I stopped here to take a break. Afterwards, I just walked back right down the mountain. I came up like half mile, so I had to walk another half mile right back up, and that's like 400, 500 feet, something like that. And then this trail just does that again like 3 more times today, so that should be interesting. I really could not believe I did an extra 1,000 feet in elevation that day, but oh well. When I walked by the same peregrine falcon warning sign again, my heart sank as I recognized it, and I knew I was not going in the right direction. I hiked past a couple going down and then back up, and they were like, "Did you already lap us?" I made it to the slopes of Middlebury College Snowbowl early that evening. I filtered some water and talked to a couple groups who were walking out from swimming at Pleiad Lake. They seemed to not be getting swarmed with mosquitoes as I was, and I was covered head to toe. And at that moment, I had a realization. Oh my gosh. Yet another just dumb mistake. I can't find my little pocket stove thing. So I can't boil water, and I just waited till like 8 to eat because I thought the bugs would go away, and they didn't. And then I tried to get out and find my stove, but I can't find it. I think I left it at the last campsite. I put it down before I was done eating. Usually I put the stove back in the little case that I used to eat, and I just never did after I finished eating, so I'm pretty sure it's just back at the other campsite. I'm really kicking myself though. I feel like these small mistakes with like my trekking pole breaking and the water filter didn't work the first 4 or 5 days. And now I lose my stove and all these little mistakes. I just turned around and went the wrong way for half a mile today. It's either going to catch up to me or nothing is going to stop me. I'm just going to be able to finish the trail no matter what. Pretty frustrating, to be honest. And tonight, instead of making Spanish rice, I'm having a Spam quesadilla. So I'll let you know how that goes. This section of the Long Trail traverses Breadloaf Wilderness and spans the area from Middlebury Gap to Lincoln Gap further north. This land was given to Middlebury College from Joseph Battelle, a philanthropist and environmentalist from Middlebury, Vermont in 1915. It was eventually sold to the Forest Service in the 30s and the 50s, and such was the creation of the northern unit of the Green Mountain National Forest. I woke up at 5 a.m. to rain once again, and was hiking by 6. It was still very buggy out, and need the net from early on. The goal for the morning was to climb Breadloaf Mountain and take an extended break at Emily Proctor Lodge. Early morning fog broke to show some amazing views on this ridge of the Green Mountains. This was the first time on trail I could really see where I was hiking to and from. It's easy to forget to look up while hiking in the Green Tunnel, so these views certainly helped with that. Mount Roosevelt would provide for a wonderful view as well. I ran into another Stowe thru-hiker that said there were a lot of trees down across the trail and mini bushwhacks ahead. I set up camp at Cooley Glen Shelter. There had been a lot of mosquito activity, so I decided to set up the tent instead of taking the risk of sleeping in the shelter without cover. I soaked some couscous in water, tried to warm it in the sun to rehydrate it. It actually kind of worked, and I enjoyed some lukewarm couscous for dinner. Oh man, alright, good morning. It is day 11, and waking up, it was so cold last night. It definitely got into the 40s. I have my puffy jacket wrapped around my legs because I was cold, but it's not too bad. Gotta get up and get going. I have to climb Mount Abraham and Mount Ellen today, which are both above 4,000 feet, so gotta get moving. Day 11 was filled with mountain summits. First on the docket was a mile climb up Mount Grant from Cooley Glen. A beautiful expansive view on the top of Grant, despite the very narrow trail covered in ferns and foliage. I even saw my third garter snake of the trip so far, basking in the sun. I was so glad to run into some trail magic at the Lincoln Gap trailhead. I grabbed a cold cranberry long drink and tucked it into my pack before my 2.6 mile climb up Mount Abraham. Figured it would be a great treat for the top. Rested at Battelle Shelter halfway up and continued up Abraham, the state's 5th tallest peak with views of the Champlain Valley and Adirondacks. I finally made it up Mount Abraham. I had a cheese and pepperoni wrap for lunch and took in the views. I met a Green Mountain Club caretaker named Eco on the top of Abraham. We chatted a while about the Long Trail and through hiking in general. It's always cool to run into and chat with people of similar interests and experiences in the wilderness. I carried on my way along the same ridge, down, up, and over Little Abe, followed by Mount Ellen, which is actually 60 feet higher than Mount Abraham. I was thoroughly enjoying the expansive views, moderate temperatures, wind that kept the bugs away, and a decent amount of local traffic to converse with along the walk. The other side of the mountain is home to Mad River Glen ski area. I was excited to see that both the Glen Ellen Lodge and Stark's Nest were open to hikers in the off-season. It's really cool to see that all the ski resorts keep the lodges and lift huts open, as it provides an oasis of sorts at the tops of the mountains. I was so pumped to finally see a view of Lake Champlain and Burlington, Vermont to the northwest. I made it to Stark's Nest and set up camp inside with another thru-hiker named Lost and Found. Lost and Found works search and rescue in the same area of North Carolina that I guide trips in. Said he hopes to never see me again. I exchanged a phone charge out of my power bank for his stove to boil some water for dinner. Seemed like a fair trade for both of us.
I pushed hard yesterday and the day before, son. Was more wanting to stop early tonight. And I opened the door and I said, yeah, this is home.
A couple steps, but in slow motion. A couple tasting in the ocean.
I popped open my long drink and headed outside to take in the most amazing sunset I saw while on trail. What a stunning view of the Champlain Valley to the west. I had a bar service up there and even got a chance to talk to Kelly for about 15 minutes or so. Keeps me going.
Can't nobody see you. A couple steps, but in slow motion. A couple tasting in the ocean. Like that. Thought that it would heal you, but it's poison. I thought I lost it. I thought I lost it. I can't lie, can't lie, can't lie. I thought I lost it.
Day 12, mile 161. Step 1, hike 2.5 miles to Appalachian Gap and hitch into Waitsfield for a half day off and full resupply. Appalachian Gap, or App Gap, is on Route 17, which climbs past Mad River Glen Ski Resort and goes between Stark and Baby Stark Mountains before descending into Starksboro. I aim to head into town and be back on trail the same evening. I was on pace to finish in plenty of time, but still wanted to keep up the pace. I didn't quite catch the 5 a.m. sunrise, but the views from Stark's Nest early in the morning were second to none. I enjoyed my time with a roof over my head, but needed to head north. The less time on trail, the more time relaxing in town. There was a series of cool rebar ladders on the backside of Mount Ellen that made for some fun hiking and filming. I made it to App Gap and really didn't feel like trying to hitch in. Seemed like a tough location on a tight bend in the road at the top of the mountain pass. I called Trail Angel Bill and 30 minutes later he showed up with a ride into town. Class act by him. I resupplied and got a fried buffalo chicken sandwich for dinner before hitching back to the trailhead. Back on the trail. Alright, well that was a pretty good resupply in Waitsfield, Vermont. Got like 3.5 days worth of food. Got the best buffalo fried chicken sandwich I've ever had. It was so good. And now I'm hiking about 2.5 miles north to the next hut, the next cabin for tonight. And I'm gonna stay there and then restart in the morning. So just made it to this awesome view though. You can see Burnt Rock Mountain and Camel's Hump here in the background. There's Camel's Hump right there. So that's what I'm gonna be doing tomorrow. Basically just up and over these ridges here, just keep a roller coaster in it all the way to Canada. I had mixed emotions that day. This was the day I enrolled in a wilderness first responder course in July in Charlotte, North Carolina. I decided it was possible that I'd take guiding to the next level in some sort of way, and that had really been on my mind. I was also grateful of Tanner from Massachusetts, who was on his way to a 2-week-long log cabin building course nearby and gave me a ride to the trailhead. I wound down at the shelter and tried going to sleep early. Alright, I gotta do this one walking. I gotta keep going, but It's 5:57 in the morning. It's supposed to be super hot today, so I'm trying to get a bunch of hiking done before the sun. This is probably one of, if not the hardest section of the trail. There's a couple of mountains to climb like I was talking about before. There's Camel's Hump. There's also, on the last day of this resupply, is Mount Mansfield, which is the highest point in the state. That's quite the 4-day jaunt there with those mountains. So it's gonna be up and down. Tons of elevation gain and lost. Gotta start off strong and hope I can power through some of the heat today. Day 13, mile 166. The northern mountains were looming in the distance. Burnt Rock, Ethan Allen, Camel's Hump, Bolton, and Mount Mansfield all in the next 4-day resupply. I had made enough mistakes up until now and pushed through them all to feel like I could do anything. That being said, this trail was not easy. A worker at the grocery store in Irisville said I had only got a small bite of true Vermont hiking up until now, and was yet to see the steepest trails. I couldn't sleep that night due to mosquitoes. The temperature never really got below 75 and very little wind, if any. I woke up at 4:30 in the morning after 4 hours of disturbed sleep, just started walking. Burnt Rock Mountain was a warm-up to Camel's Hump that day and gave me some cool shots along with the idea for the intro to the series. I was so happy to witness the views and experience this trail on a clear day. Alright, we're getting closer to Camel's Hump. I think I drop a couple hundred feet into this little ridge right here, this bottom part of the ridge. Then I climb like 1,300 feet up to Camel's Hump, but it's getting closer. It was difficult mentally hiking downhill right before the next peak 3 times in a row. Hiking down 500 feet just to go back up another 1,000 feet. Then you realize that's just how the mountains crumble. If you're gonna hike across the whole state, that's just what you have to expect. Sometimes it's difficult to not constantly zoom in on the elevation profile of the next 5 miles in Gaia. I try to refrain from micromanaging my hike. I rested at Montclair Glen Lodge before the last push up Camel's Hump. That's where I just came from, down here. This is just like climbing. Just a vertical rock wall, it's like climbing. The Native Americans in this area first named this mountain Saddle Mountain. Samuel de Champlain's explorers called it Resting Lion in the 1600s. Ira Allen used Camel's Rump on a 1798 map, and this became Camel's Hump Mountain in 1830. The park was a 1,000-acre gift from Colonel Battelle. It must be the original trail up the mountain because it's a straight-up rock staircase. The view at the top was breathtaking and totally worth it. This is killer. This is no joke. Not an easy trail at all. Probably one of the more difficult days, if not the most difficult day, going up and over Camel's Hump. But I'm like a mile from the next shelter, so I'm gonna check that out for a campsite. I got into camp after a long day out on trail with very little sleep. A heat wave was incoming and I needed to eat, hydrate, and rest. I heard a critter outside my tent every once in a while, but it didn't bother me too much. Alright, up at 5 o'clock again, trying to beat the heat. It's barely gonna get below 70, even overnight. High 80s during the day, and I'm climbing a couple mountains, including Mount Mansfield tomorrow. It's gonna be the hottest day, so we'll see how that goes, but just one day at a time. Gonna get packed up and try to get 5 or 6 miles before like 8 in the morning. Not all of my food fit in my bear can, so I was glad no animals found the dry bag hung in the tree that was easily reachable by any bear. I felt like I hadn't quite caught up on sleep from the night before, but I thought it was a lot more important to wake up early again to get some miles in before the heat. With the sun rising around 5 a.m., it was tough not having any time to hike before sunrise. I was sweating profusely by 6 a.m. Luckily, I had 3 miles of downhill hiking to do right away before 3 miles of completely flat road walk. I was looking forward to this 3-mile section for a long time, by far the flattest part of the trail. There was also some cool little waterfalls and rock formations on the north side of Camel's Hump. Finally got off the mountain and made it to Duxbury Road. The Winooski River Valley has had some problems with flooding recently, with big floods in July of 2023, December 2023, and most recently after my hike in July of 2024. Route 100 at the intersection with Ward Hill and Duxbury had washed out with a collapse, just south of Harwood Union High School. A lot of the roads, bridges, and farmland have been completely submerged and destroyed in what has been a series of catastrophic floods. Just a little breeze. I definitely needed this break. It's been like 9.5 miles I think I've hiked. Started hiking at like 5:30, 5:45. It's like noonish right now, so it might not seem like a lot of miles or a good pace, but this is brutal. This is the toughest day. I'm going through a lot of water. I'm sweating so much, but it's just so humid and nothing's evaporating. There really hasn't been too much wind, although I am starting to climb again, so I'm hoping to get more wind and be exposed to that as the day goes on. There's a shelter like 2.5 miles away that I think I'll hike to. It was my goal for today was to get to there, so I'll probably hike there and hang out all afternoon. I don't know, maybe do some night hiking, because this is day hiking in the sun is tough. And I got Mansfield tomorrow. I had about 2,000 feet of elevation to gain before Buchanan Shelter, my goal for the day. I was taking a lot of breaks in the afternoon heat and divided the section into 5 smaller, mile-long sections. Not to beat a dead horse, but I was very wary from the lack of sleep, difficult terrain, and weather the past couple of days. This is part of a through hike when mental strength is most important. I think in reality anyone can finish a long trail, but only some have the willpower to push through tough days. As I always say, getting to camp is the best part of the day. Buchanan Shelter was a really cool shelter and a great home for the night. It took me the entire day to hike around 13 miles. My pace compared to hiking the Arizona Trail was almost 25% slower. It seemed like the AZT would have difficult mountain climbing days, and then 2 to 3 easy days winding through the valleys and deserts in between the mountain ranges. The Long Trail, however, never had an easy day. It was a complete roller coaster up and down 2,000 to 3,000 feet at a time, sometimes multiple times a day. 2 weeks down, 1 week to go to the northern terminus at the Canada border. This is brutal already. It's like 5:20 and I'm already dripping sweat. Tried to put on this sun hoodie instead of the blue shirt that I've been wearing because I think the blue one is heavier. This one does have a hood. I hope it's lighter than the other one when it gets wet. The blue one, when it gets wet, it just feels like 10 pounds. But yeah, I have like 15 miles to do before the intersection on Mount Mansfield, for the highway to get to Stowe, Vermont. So I think I'm just gonna break that up between today and early tomorrow morning and then go into town tomorrow because I can't do 15 miles and go into town today. 10 to 12 today and something like 3 to 5 early tomorrow and head into town. But this has been by far the toughest section because of the terrain and the weather. And it all lined up perfectly. Harrington's View is located via a 100-foot slide trail east of the Long Trail. The trail leads to a precipitous cliff on the side of Bolton Mountain. It boasts one of the best views in the area over Bolton Valley. It was really cool to see the sunrise right over the ridge to the east. Only about 1,000 more feet of elevation up to Bolton Mountain. This is not easy. No view on top of Bolton Mountain. That's alright. Next stop, Puffer Shelter, on the north side of Bolton Mountain. Bolton has always been a pretty small and rural community. The French Indian and Revolutionary Wars kept this area in a state of wilderness. It was almost 1800 before the first people came to stay in this community. Early settlers took advantage of the fertile soil and wildlife in the Winooski River Valley. It also served as a roadway and later railroad from Boston to Montreal. I took another afternoon break and rested at Taylor Lodge before starting the climb up Mount Mansfield. It was convenient to have Butler Lodge halfway up the mountain to call home for the night. A very nice shelter with a caretaker there as well. He was very nice to let me use his Coleman propane stove to heat up some water, so I didn't have to eat cold couscous or a tuna wrap once again. I was delighted to have a warm meal, access to water, and an enclosed lodge to sleep in for the night before the summit of Mansfield. The crux of the trail the last couple of days with Camel's Hump and Mansfield back to back, but just one more day and I'd be in Stowe for my last town day and resupply. I enjoyed the sunset from Butler Lodge and even captured a little porcupine on the GoPro time-lapse. I hear he's a frequent and local visitor at Butler Lodge. I camped at Butler Lodge with another northbound thru-hiker, and we both woke up with the sun around 5. I packed up and started hiking right away to tackle the last couple miles and 1,000 feet up Mansfield. Got pretty technical on the way up with plenty of ladders and steep rock slabs to maneuver. I was relieved to feel the worst of the heat wave ending. It was bearable, and being at higher altitude with plenty of cloud cover helped a ton. I thoroughly enjoyed the trail up the forehead of Mansfield. The tops of the mountains really feel like a total different ecosystem than any other parts of the trail. Being above tree line, we were technically in an alpine tundra zone, a fragile area where it's important to stay on the trail. I summited Mansfield before 7 a.m. in the clouds. If I had waited a couple hours, they would have subsided to unveil a stunning view, but as usual, I favored more time in town. I had a good habit of getting into town early and getting back on the trail the same evening. It saves a ton of time compared to taking full 0 days. It definitely takes a toll on the body over time, though. I made it down Mansfield near Smuggler's Notch and stopped into Barnes Camp. It was there I met Ira and Cindy, trail angels at the camp. From them I got a bunch of snacks, a refreshing soda, and a ride into town. It was greatly appreciated. I was very eager to do laundry, charge some electronics, and backwash my water filter. I hung out at the Stowe library basically all day before walking out of town to American Flatbread for a pizza and a drink. I was about a minute late getting to the restaurant before a deluge of rain came through. I continued walking out of town trying to get a hitch back to the trail, and before it got too dark I got picked up by Jared and his wife from Boston. I got pretty darn lucky with all the hitches. Alright, I just hitched back to the visitor center that I was at that I got the original ride from. Got a pizza and a cider in town in Stowe and started walking out. Took like 30 minutes or so to get a hitch. Super nice people, Jared and his wife from Massachusetts, Boston area. Shout out them. They just pulled over on the side of a highway basically. Kind of feel a little bit like a bum through hiking from one part of the state to the other, or the entire state, and it's kind of just living out of your backpack. But when people go out of their way to help you out, it really means a lot, and just the smallest gestures really mean a ton. So they'll never see this, but shout out to them because I really appreciate it. It was getting super dark too. It was like 9:15. I still had like 3 hours of walking, like 5 or 6 miles to go. So I was probably just gonna pull to the side and just like sleep under an awning of some store or something like that. I don't know. Home sweet home. Like clockwork, I woke up around 5 to some rain. Between guiding in Pisgah National Forest in North Carolina and hiking the Long Trail, I sure am now accustomed to backpacking in the rain. Stowe is in a little valley, so this morning I was to climb the other ridge up to Madonna Peak and Whiteface Mountain. Alright, Smuggler's Notch. Once again in the clouds, Smuggler's Notch. It's quite the climb up this other side, on the other side of Mansfield. Got to climb up here and got a couple mountains to get over to today as well. So just because the hardest part is over doesn't mean that it's going to be easy. Not at all. I didn't do too much research about the Long Trail beforehand. I knew about where I could resupply along the way, but I didn't know anything about the highlights of the trail. Basically drove to the southern terminus with 4 days of food and started walking. For that reason, hidden gems like Sterling Pond were a huge surprise. A stunning mountaintop lake that was very tempting to swim in. It seems like the last half mile of a lot of these mountains in the northern section of the Long Trail joins in with a portion of a ski slope to the top. Sometimes it's somewhat of a blue trail, sometimes it seems like a double black. The last part of Madonna was pretty insane. The camera doesn't seem to do it justice. Big poop mound. Jeez. I descended Whiteface Mountain and stopped at Bear Hollow Shelter to finish the rest of the pizza I packed out from Stowe. Almost 50 more miles to the border. I hadn't seen many thru-hikers except a couple gals heading southbound. We chatted a while and I was asking about their experience on the Rutland Trail in North Carolina, another soon-to-be hike trail.
That was more than that.
I made it to Lamoille River, 7 miles by trail north of Whiteface. Another 3-mile jaunt up to an empty round-top shelter to where I set up camp. There were lots of mosquitoes, so I took apart the bug net of my shelter and hung it inside the shelter for cover. My shoes along with my tent had been wet for a few days now since Stowe and never seemed to completely dry. It was getting more difficult to wake up early every morning. Can you really blame me for sleeping until 7:30 with the sound of rain at Round Top Shelter? I started the ascent up Laraway Mountain, and turns out it goes by some private land, a maple tree-filled forest with several active sap collection sites to make maple syrup. There were also a few neat waterfalls next to the trail. It was still too early and the clouds hadn't quite cleared yet to see much at Laraway Lookout. This is the first day I didn't really feel like my feet recovered from being wet and muddy from the previous day. My socks and shoes had been swamped and won't dry. My shoes have lost most all its tread and developing holes on both sides. My gear and I are hanging on by a thread but determined to finish the trail. This is not great, honestly. My feet are so torn up. Both of my heels, the skin is just like torn off. My big toes, the inside of my heel too. My shoes are wearing off. Just wherever my shoes are wearing off or getting a hole, there's so much friction and my feet are just getting destroyed. And they've been soaked for 2 days straight just because the trail is wet, and I get wet even if it's not raining. Everything else is wet and there's mud. Your shoes just get soaked with your socks. So it's just like my pruned feet are just, the skin is just getting torn off them and they hurt so bad. Every single step is excruciating. That being said, I have about 6.7 miles till Spruce Ledge Shelter, I think it's called, and have to climb Butternut Mountain here, which is like 1,000 feet and 1.2 miles. So the friction's not as bad going uphill, but it still hurts so bad. Just wish me luck. I had lunch at Corliss Camp and finished the climb up Butternut Mountain. I saw a cool looking millipede and one of the biggest slugs I've ever seen. My feet are completely torn up and I'm all out of KT tape and Leuko tape. It was just one foot in front of the other at this point, and it hurt more to take breaks, having to restart, than it did to just keep on trucking. In hindsight, this was the most difficult day mentally and physically. Luckily, it was a Saturday and Kelly was off for a couple hours to be able to have a 15-minute conversation. Took my mind off my feet for the last mile down to Spruce Ledge Camp. It started pouring soon after arrival, and I had some cold couscous for dinner before going to sleep. Rained all evening, night, and morning. I was getting a bit lazy sleeping in, but still on track to finish as planned, so I felt like not rushing would be best. And on the bright side, I was back on track getting a normal amount of sleep. I was getting used to the shelter life. Alright, good morning. What is today? The 23rd, day 18. Hopefully 2 more full days of hiking and then just like a mile or 2 on the last day. It's supposed to rain all day today, according to the lady who was at the shelter with me here last night. She said it was going to rain all day. It's not too heavy right now, and there's always a lot of trees and canopy to catch a lot of the rain, but still it's going to soak the whole entire trail. The trail's just going to be a creek basically, so we'll see how this goes. My feet are in, as I've said probably 100 times now, are in not good shape at all, and even just putting on my wet socks and shoes, they're just stinging, and we'll see how this goes. But just gotta push through. A few days left and then I'll be at the terminus, and that's what's keeping me going. Deja vu, I put on wet socks and shoes and packed my pack a tad more carefully with rain all day in the forecast. I put on my pack cover and raincoat and set out to climb Mount Belvedere. At least there would be so much water available so I didn't have to carry much at all. 30 miles to the finish line. This is ridiculous, man. Can't just get one normal day of hiking on this trail. This is just insane. Just in this little cave right now. Just taking a little break. Got some cover. Started to rain pretty hard there for a second. I'm just gonna keep walking. I'm not... Screw a snack break. Don't need lunch. Don't need to fill up water. I'm just gonna keep walking until I get to the next shelter. And oh man, it's exasperating, honestly. I've heard that it takes up to 3 weeks to truly get your trail legs on a long through hike. It was day 19 and climbing Mount Belvedere was the first time I felt like I had mine. I did not feel like my legs were getting tired and never really out of breath. The weather was mild and the bugs were minimal. I ran into a few day hikers making the summit as well. We were up in the clouds, but definitely another cool fire tower to check out. The trail is literally just a creek. From here on out, the trail would be underwater. My water source at any moment could be just the stream next to the trail or the little runoff that was the trail. Early summer is mud season for the Long Trail, and it's kind of frowned upon to hike on it during this time because it gets heavily damaged. I felt like hiking the last 40 miles of the Long Trail underwater wasn't great for it, but in my mind it had to be done. I was telling people I can't fail another thru-hike attempt. The ridge from Belvedere continues up, down, and across to Haystack Mountain. I stopped for lunch at Tillotson Camp and continued on to find camp at Hazen's Notch. It was another day, only 13.7 miles, but more than 4,500 feet elevation gain and loss. I met a couple gals also camping at Hazen's Notch doing a section hike going southbound. We chatted a while about what's to come for both of us north and south. The past few hikers have congratulated me on my thru-hike, and I'm grateful, but I know I still have 2 more days out on trail to close it out. I'm now usually waking up around 7 or 7:15 and feeling great. Giving my feet the maximum amount of time not being used is ideal. About 20 miles to go, split into 2 days. It was another rainy morning to climb up and out of Hazen's Notch to Buchanan Peak. Hazen's Notch marks the terminus of the Hazen Military Road built in 1779. It was built by General Moses Hazen and his American Revolutionary Forces in an attempt to reach and invade Montreal. Alright, what's up y'all? It's a day 20 here on the Long Trail. Just climbed Buchanan Mountain, 2,940 feet elevation. Second to last day on trail. I'm gonna be climbing J Peak, which is the last big one, the last one over 3,000 feet. Early this afternoon or late this morning. I'm doing like 12 or 13 miles today, and then like 3 or 4 to wrap it up tomorrow morning and get to the border and get out of here. So at this point I'm just itching to get done, and I can't wait to make it to the border. It's supposed to rain pretty much all day today again, just off and on. Sometimes it's not even enough to get through the canopy, but sometimes it's a deluge for a little bit, so we'll see what I get. I made it out of the notch and up Buchanan with J Peak in the distance. I took my normal extended rest break at J Camp before the climb up the peak. J Peak was the last big challenge heading north. I tried to wait out the rain a bit, but it wasn't letting up much at all. At this point, I was just taking any chance I could to dry my feet. Climbing J Peak, the last big peak of the trail. I'm just in the clouds right now. Wind and rain is just blowing. It's hard to even film. My phone will get wet. My GoPro batteries are dead. Doing what I can, but yesterday I plugged in my phone and it wouldn't charge because there was water in the port, so I don't want to risk anything. It was my last full day on trail, and I knew I could push through anything. It could storm for the rest of the time and I'd be okay. I kinda enjoyed the last scramble up J Peak on the rock slabs. As long as it wasn't hot, I really didn't mind the weather. I was bummed I didn't get a last big view, but it is what it is. I took shelter in the ski resort buildings on top of JP. Well, that was dumb, and that just hurt a lot, but I just fell in between these two logs here. And my feet just submerged, and then I like fell sideways too. And that was a bad fall. I've probably fallen like 20 plus times on this trail. It's insane. I'm trying to tell myself to slow down and take it easy. The slippery rocks, deep mud, rotten logs, and heavily rooted trails were all hazards in the northern section and really forced me to slow down. And then I pass a trail runner going southbound trying to break the speed record under a week, doing 50 plus miles a day. 13 is getting difficult for me now. I climbed Doll Peak and down to Shooting Star Shelter where I met Easily Forgotten. He had been out on trail 367 days, yo-yoing the entire AT and LT back to back. He certainly had some trail stories to tell. Ira from Barnes Camp back in Stowe had agreed to pick me up from the northern terminus and take me as far as Montpelier, and I eagerly accepted. I had arranged a ride from Journey's End at around 9 a.m., so I woke up at 4:45 to get going early. I wanted plenty of time to film and take in the last few minutes of the Long Trail. Alright, it's day 21. It's about 8 in the morning almost. And I am a quarter mile from finishing the Long Trail. I'm so close. The border is just right there. The final approach to the terminus with the sign in sight felt so good. I had done it. 275 miles in 21 days without taking any zeros. My body was beat, but it didn't matter. The Canadian border was in sight. I took my time at the border taking pictures, videos, eating breakfast, and just taking in the sights and the beautiful morning in general. Being out on trail for 3 weeks is worth it just for the feeling of finishing the trail. I had 1.5 more miles to the parking lot to meet up with Ira. I tried to wash my shoes off in the creek one last time before getting off trail. Legend has it they're still wet to this day. Ira met me with a hot coffee, a wonderful gesture by him. He dropped me off near the bus depot in Montpelier, but my trip was not over quite yet. I booked a $2 bus to Burlington and got a burger in the meantime from Buddy's Famous Burgers. From Burlington, I took an Uber to the Greyhound stop near the airport and caught a bus to Bennington, Vermont. From Bennington, I walked out of town on the highway for about 4 miles before getting picked up by Zeke, a local hotel owner from India. He refused to be paid and said God had been good to him, and when God gives him a chance to do good, he tries to. Perfect end to a journey across the state and back again. Oh baby, back at the truck. Let's go. I have mixed emotions about the Long Trail. At times it's frustrating, and at times it'll totally knock your socks off. One thing I do know is it's been the most rewarding trek I've been on. The moral of this one was really about overcoming challenges. Between conversing with some AT hikers and from personal experience, through hiking is all about having the right mindset. You gotta see the beauty of the trail to be able to push through the roadblocks. I can see myself hiking the Long Trail south someday. I could see myself hiking the part that follows the AT again someday. But it feels so good knowing that I finally finished the thru hike and closed the chapter for once. Thank y'all so much for watching. It's been a wild ride and your support is greatted. Till next time, y'all. Peace.